Sorry, just bear with me. Words have disappeared. No!
Can you put the mic near your mouth?
I can, when I'm saying something that people actually need to hear. Is that better? Yeah? Okay. So, just check this is working. That's not working. That is. All right. So this is just a quick slide, just in case any of you, almost everyone I'm sure, got the reference in my title, but just in case anyone didn't. Another Girl, Another Planet is, of course, referencing probably the greatest song by The Only Ones. Seemed appropriate here because of the esoteric interests of the lead singer, Peter Parrott, of The Only Ones, as noted here by Christopher Partridge. This is too good a slide not to recycle, so I just wanted to pop this up while I did the obligatory thank yous to all of the organizers of Occulture, particularly Georgia, for inviting me out here again. It's really, really exceptional, so I'm super excited to be involved. This presentation is going to consider the potentially transformative implications of the concept of reality shifting on both a personal and cultural level, with reflections and insights gathered from my own multifaceted perspective and positionality. So as a scholar of occultural studies, as an active occultural producer and storyteller, and as a practitioner of magic, I have the capacity to approach this material in a way that can provide both an insider and outsider perspective, an emic and etic insight. And so how this is going to go is I'm going to give a very quick overview of what reality shifting is. Then I'm going to do a quick breakdown of two primary mini-world ontologies, which are sort of modes of understanding for reality shifters. And then the last part, I'm going to be bringing in why this is so exciting for me in relation to my own practice. Unfortunately, that's going to be the part that is going to be as illuminating to me as it is to all of you. I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen there. I'm so excited about that material that material is like a little excited puppy that's desperate to go for a walk, but I can't get the fucking lead on it to get it out the door, so we'll all see how that transpires. Right. So this image here is from a screen capture of a personal blog article from last year from a reality shifter called Ashley Coe. Reality shifting is a contemporary cultural practice and burgeoning online subculture that had a dramatic rise in prominence and popularity during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. And by dramatic, I mean dramatic. So just down here in this corner, there's two search terms on Google there. The one along is sort of a control search term, that's stress reduction, which might be something you think someone might have looked for during the pandemic, but didn't. That enormous blue spike there, that's reality shifting, when it went like just a phenomenal increase in people's interest. Where am I? And so, to give more insight into the enormous interest in reality shifting, so it's embarrassing that I only found out about it this year, frankly, on internet forums, social media platforms like YouTube, and particularly TikTok, where trending reality shifting hashtags have collectively amassed billions of views. So for example, hashtag ShiftTalk, I just checked that again this morning, that's now 6.5 billion hits. Hashtag reality shifting 2.9 billion, and hashtag shifting realities is currently clocking in at 8.7 billion views. So that's just on TikTok, and that's a lot. So shifting, as it's commonly referred to, is the ability to explore and directly experience alternative, often crucially fictional realities. So a shifter projects their consciousness into a preconceived target reality, what the community has termed a desired reality, or a DR, from their current reality, the CR. Desired realities can vary hugely in terms of the quality and magnitude of the difference from one's current reality. So it can be from like the most subtle differences to a complete transformation to an entirely alien world. A commonplace within the reality shifted communities is the framework of understanding the process through the lens of contemporary manifestation practices. So it's very much a part, not in all cases, but in a lot, if not the majority of cases, it's part of this kind of manifestation practices, which are, as we know, are rooted in the prior New Thought movement. And particularly the use of affirmation. And in this framework, however, the difference is one does not seek to manifest transformations within one's existing reality. One's not bringing something into the reality, but instead manifesting a shift to a different desired reality wherein one will then encounter the new set of circumstances they seek. So it's a sort of inversion, it's a conceptual shift. Instead of trying to manifest, I want to manifest, I'll go back to the puppy again, and create that in this world, you're actually manifesting a shift to an entirely different desired reality where that puppy was always a thing in that reality. So there's no fixed, singular, canonized set of practices in reality-shifting communities. However, there's many practices and methods that are used to achieve these shifts to different realities, including meditation, relaxation, liminal and trance states, active imagination, visualization, affirmations, and subliminal suggestion. Another commonly employed tool in reality shifting is what's known as scripting. Now, scripts define an outline of the descriptors and the characteristics as to how the desired reality is or should be, and even how the shifter will be when they get there. So they write a detailed breakdown or outline, well, to different levels of detail with different shifters. But essentially, they narrativize, they write down, they script what they expect the desired reality to be, and in many cases, how they expect themselves to be when they arrive there. Now, as I've already said, realities of these shifters are often, even mostly, fictional. Indeed, there's a very clear interrelationship with fan fiction internet subcultures here. One of the most popular alternate fictional universes by far for the reality shifting community is the world of the Harry Potter book and film series. In fact, as you can see here on this blog article, if you've had a close look, there's a very excited "I Met Draco Malfoy" subtitle to the title of this particular article. So this common reference to to the world of Harry Potter. Just to give you a quick few examples, these are some screen caps of some YouTube. So these are some delightful folks that primary concern is reality shifting to Hogwarts. There's another one. As a graphic designer, I have some thoughts, but we'll leave that to one side. Yeah. So you can get a little bit of an input as well into some of the tone of these articles that we find on TikTok and YouTube. And these screen grabs are just from, as I say, a handful of the huge numbers of shifters talking about their excursions to Hogwarts, with a frankly disturbing number doing so to engage in, I think we'll call it romantic entanglement, specifically with Draco Malfoy. Honestly. So the reason why Draco Malfoy holds this particularly important status amongst reality shifters is probably worthy of an in-depth study all of its own. So maybe that's where I'll go next. That's an exciting paper. all of its own. So here's a great paper by Sommer et al. This is getting into a little more of the nitty-gritty. So central to experiencing these reality-shifting phenomena, as noted in this recent paper, are the conditions of plurality, disassociation, imagination, and of course, narrativity. I'm sorry, it's very tiny down there, but I'm telling you that's what they're drawing attention to. So fascinatingly for me, these are also key conditions and factors with the related, and it is listed there as well, occultural internet subculture of tulpamancy. So again, anyone that knows me knows I'm deeply fascinated with tulpamancy. And the correlation between these phenomena is quite massive. In fact, if we just take that little list that I just gave you, I mean, I don't have time to unpack, really run with this line of flight, but really briefly, if we look at plurality as one that was listed previously, for reality shifting. Of course, plural systems is how tulpamancy functions. Disassociation, well, I mean, there's the link between tulpamancy and dissociative identity disorder. Disassociation is kind of built into it. And there's also this fact that it shows to the extent to which the self is a construct, and with the phenomenon in tulpamancy of being able to switch between the different sort of personhoods, system members, however you want to do it, and that in fact the original, there's some, people don't like to use the word host anymore because there's some concern about sort of the tulpas or the subsequent system members should have an equal standing. And of course there's the phenomenon of people swapping, switching in later tulpas permanently, and they function perfectly well. And so this kind of asks questions about, you know, any kind of like notion of an authentic self, right? Yes. And of course, imagination, that's easy. This is just a graphic I did for a tulpamancy talk I did. My little tulpa imaginary friendship is magic, so there's the imagination link. And of course, narrativity, and that's pretty easy. Not least of all, isn't it interesting that they both have this connection with fan fiction or fandom, and they both have their roots, you know, in with respect to the previous one, Harry Potter verse, and with this one, My Little Pony and the Brony community. But there's more than that, and there's the fact that narration is one of the most effective methods within tulpamancy for the creation of tulpas. And so, yeah, all of these factors are central to both. And as I say, we could go on and on and on about the crossovers between the two, but we shan't, because I want to move on. And I want to talk about two of the most prominent many-world ontologies of reality shifting and how people conceptualize this. So the first one we're going to go for is quite a common one. Some reality shifters draw on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, unfortunately, which posits that every possible outcome of a quantum event occurs in a separate, non-communicating branch of the universe, believing that their techniques and methods allow them to consciously navigate or jump between these parallel multiverses or alternative realities. Now, I would very strongly suspect that such notions are far more likely the result of the widespread adoption of multiverses and branching parallel timelines being used as narrative devices within popular culture. Narrative tools that should not be conflated with the actual theoretical frameworks used in scientific research. Of course, this narrative device is not entirely new. We can go back farther, but I immediately thought of you know, such classics as Quantum Leap. That's the Welsh version. Quantum Leap in the late 80s, early 90s. But the mediascape is now utterly saturated with parallel universes and multiverses as plot devices. I wouldn't give you a list because you could run off 50 like at the drop of a hat. It's absolutely everywhere. So the idea commonly employed in shifting the community here is that there's an infinite or near infinite number of multiverses with infinite versions of shifters in them. Therefore, this is the interesting logical leap, therefore there will be a multiverse the shifter can project into that is exactly the same or at least very similar to one described in the fictional work that they seek. So they try and do this move where they're going like, no, of course we're not suggesting it's the actual fictional world, but there's so many multiverses, it's almost infinite, that there must be one that's like Harry Potter and I'm in it. That is the logic. So the notion that the many worlds interpretation implies the existence of alternative universes which might be incredibly like fictional worlds imagined in our own universe is a clear misinterpretation and an extrapolation of the theory beyond its intended scope. Within the scientific community, multi-world interpretation is generally focused on the explaining phenomena at the quantum level, not the creation of alternative realities through macroscopic or everyday decisions, and certainly not mirroring our fictional worlds because of so many multiverses existing. It's somehow probable that one of those, like a Harry Potter verse, would be out there somewhere. This is very much fudging the science. An alternative ontology is the possible worlds. So other proponents of reality shifting engage the philosophical concept of possible worlds as it's used in narrative theory and literary theory. Oh, there we go. In this approach, reality shifters may view their experiences as a kind of hyper-immersive role-playing, where they engage with and explore their own imaginal or socially co-constructed possible worlds. The emergence of the philosophical concept of possible worlds in this sense is usually first attributed to Leibniz and his theodicy, with the thesis that the existing world is the best of all possible worlds, even though this best possible world God has ostensibly created must and does still contain evil. This idea, although hugely influential, has understandably come under significant criticism, quite famously. But contemporary scholars who use possible worlds theory, particularly within the context of narrative theory and literary theory, often emphasize the idea that fictional worlds, imaginal worlds, and the possible worlds of future production are all part of a broader category of counterfactual or alternate worlds. These possible worlds are typically contrasted with the actual world, which represents the current experienced world of a given subject, which is an important point. So notably, given that this actual world, and that this is an intersubjective phenomenon, so each actual world, it's indexical, okay? So possible world theory in contemporary narratology often posits the philosophical position of modal realism, as proposed by philosopher David Lewis, that argues that every possible world is real in a manner identical to our own actual world, that there's no ontological distinction between the actual world and merely possible ones, and every world is the actual world for any given potential subject at the center of it, experientially. So in this sense, actual functions similar to other relative concepts like here and now, which are entirely dependent on the positionality of the experiencer of that world. And so we think about this. I think this is a really interesting concept because this is related to a lot of the modern neuroscience that will tell us, of course, that the world that we're experiencing is very much a hallucination that we're generating, that although there's crossover, that we have something like consensual reality, how much it marries up and to what extent we're living in similar or same worlds is up for question. And there's a lot of evidence you can see that. I certainly see it in my life. I mean, different people might take different philosophical positions. I'm suspicious that there is an objective reality out there, but I certainly don't have the faintest idea what it is at all. And I think that this is an important point because these kinds of thought processes that we have, that our experience of conscious reality is somehow the most real, the most close to the real, to objective reality. There's really no reason to suppose that whatsoever. And if there are other beings or other non-human animals that are in fact conscious, they could live in an entirely radically different sort of experience or possible world than us. And of course, to them, that is the actual world. And so there's some valuable important moves here in sort of being able to engage with this kind of theory has been sort of applied within sort of anthropology in terms of like relativity of different cultures and the worlds, the many worlds that they exist in, and as I say, to deal with problems around human exceptionalism and so forth. So now I'm just going to switch back in the very end bit to why this is very important for me. Well, it was very important for me because I didn't know anything about it, and it's right up my street, and I was very excited, and I was very offended that I didn't know anything about it, but, you know, a pandemic happened. I've had stuff on. But I have, for over 20 years now, had my own kind of personal kind of modeling and praxis and kind of magical kind of thinking playfully around this idea of being not a reality shifter. I never used that term. You'll see the term that I came up with. So just as a reminder, this is me. I'm just remaking the point that I have a positionality as a practitioner scholar. And I'm a practicing magician, but obviously by no means does that mean the stage magician that does card tricks or parlor tricks, but one of the ones, like most of you, that talks to entities, engages in divination, undertakes spells and workings and so on. But as a brief aside, and that's just a preamble to give my disclaimer, which I now do pretty much every talk I give, my disclaimer is that despite being deeply interested in esotericism and magic, I'm both a skeptic and personally subscribe to multi-model agnosticism. So importantly, I do not and never have approached any occultural practice, occultural art, or magical work as a religionist with credulity, as a believer in some sense, but rather as an experimentalist, experientialist, and as a phenomenologist. Although, just for no other reason that I really wanted to add this, I was recently going through some childhood recordings and found this absolute gem of 4-year-old Cavan that I just wanted to play because this is amazing.
Tell me what you're going to be when you grow up, Cavan.
I am going to be a magician.
Also, someone in the background says genius, if you hear it, which is... So there you go. Time loops, folks, time loops. Right, so here is my positionality. You can see how it has some crossover with reality shifting. This is actually a photo from a form that I filled out for a pre-operation assessment I had several years ago that I wanted to just have some fun with. I got some interesting reactions and some interesting discussions. For what it's worth, this is old school. I no longer use the designation interdimensional wizard because I've decided that wizard is a problematic term. It's gendered often in ways that I don't like. So I go with magus now. But I still stuck with interdimensional. Mostly because it's clearly silly and has a connection with sci-fi. And I'm trying to draw in that idea that this is like a narrative move, right? And that I'm playing make-believe. And I'm trying to... Interdimensional, for me, it's similar to what Crowley said, you know, about like retaining the idea of the holy guardian angel, and that it's that slightly playful, you know, not to be taken too serious moniker that's like valuable and helpful for sort of retaining one's sort of more... ambiguous, mutable position on the phenomenon that you're working with. Okay, so I've long since considered my framework in this interdimensional travel way, by which I mean journeys to other worlds, both journeys to other worlds, both alien and more, subtle shifts, akin to the sci-fi narration convention of timeline shifts. Like I played this idea of like switching to another timeline where something subtle's changed in it. So what I'm saying is I was doing this back in the day, all on my own. Then other many worlds explorations related to psychopumpery. I have a very close relationship with death, not least of all because I've incredibly nearly died. Me and my mum tried to work out last night. I think it's 10 times, which is too many. It's about 10 times too many, in fact. And I've also had a classical near-death experience, you know, the tunnels of light and life review, and then the endless expanse and serenity and peace and stuff. That was interesting. And not to mention a fair bit of experience journeying to other worlds, both under the influence of psychedelics, somewhat extensively, and through the experience of an experimentation with so-called astral travel. And so all of these things together is why I was like, oh, this is how I do my magic. I'm an interdimensional magus. So all of this, of course, is arguably still tricks. I'm not suggesting that there's any ontological validity or reality to this. As Lewis Hyde famously noted explicitly in the title of the famous 1998 volume, "The Trickster Makes This World." And the significance of this constellation of ideas is well understood within the magical milieu, that is, of the relationship between art and magic, between tricksters and magic, between tricksters and magic and language and writing and art, and ideas of communication and messengers, of psychopumps and death, of mediumship between this world and the other world, of the esotericist and the esoteric artist as medium, and of these tricksters and artists and shamans undertaking journeys to the underworld, the other world, and many other worlds. By the way, I also recognize the problem with the category of shaman. I just threw it in there because Alan uses it, and so it seemed appropriate, but I'm sure all of you are well aware that I'm sort of using that with an understanding of some of the very important criticism around the construction of that category. Right. So the fact that it may be a trick is not necessarily a problem. It still has real-world effects. Here is a similarly related ideology and phraseology from the LA street artist and storyteller Wordsmith, which was written for a collaborative project with master of stage magic and magician in the esoteric sense, Ferdinando Buscemi, who performed at the last Trans-States conference I organized, and it was absolutely amazing. His art is magic, the trick is you. So, just very quickly then, the last time I spoke at this conference, I talked about this very thing, about narrativity and this central issue of the story and narrativity in terms of how we shape and take control of our lives. Because stories constitute, shape, and systemize the cultural fabric from within which we're embedded. But just as culture is not divorced from nature, neither are these narrative processes entirely divorced from our biology. As narrative theorist Paul Armstrong puts it, quote, "Our species would probably not produce narratives so prolifically if they weren't somehow good for our brains and our embodied interactions with the world. The processes through which stories coordinate time, represent embodied action, and promote social collaboration are fundamental to the brain-body interactions through which our species has evolved and has constructed the cultures we inhabit. The neuroscience of these interactions is part of the explanation of how stories give shape to our lives, even as our lives give rise to stories. Furthermore, as it was pointed out yesterday, we ourselves, in a sense, are stories, and we experience and relate our life as story, and this is the narrative self. And so all of these things, I've got more here, but I need to wrap it up. All of these things allude to the fact that the process is going on here. The ideas of narration are essentially the extent to which one can deprogram and reprogram and take script control and narrative control, because as well as being the central protagonist within your life story and your life world, you're also the storyteller. And there's this feedback loop, and there's this possibility. And those of us that are experimenting with this sort of thing, and anyone that wants to talk to me about it afterwards, there is I've had direct evidence of the incredibly significant impact of these changes that one can make in making narrative shifts and changes in their use of language. I actually talk about this, let me find a slide really quickly, just here at the Occulture podcast, which you can find for free on the Trans States YouTube channel. I have a long conversation about how my entry into magic, it wasn't through being a teenager that found Crowley in the library or any other traditional things, because I was raised an Irish Catholic and terrified of that. It was actually reading The Cosmic Trigger and seeing the techniques in there that Robert Anton Wilson got from Crowley about being able to change your use of language. I used these techniques to change the terrible language that I was using, negative self-talk, an awful way of talking about myself, which gave me clinical depression for years. And not only did it totally transform me and get me away from that illness, it completely transformed the world that I was in and everything around me. And I have been experimenting as such since then. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much.